Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. It's July, and even though it's hot outside, it's still one of my favorite times of year because July is when the new Christmas collections begin arriving in the stores and on my doorstep. I love to see the new fabric collections that the talented designers have created for each new year. Last year, my challenge was to create 30 ornaments from 9 fat quarters. So this year, I thought I would try to create 32 ornaments from 10 fat quarters. And I think it's going to be a fun challenge, and I already have so many ideas in my head. I'm pretty excited. So the first ornament, of course, one of my favorites, is the stocking. Look at this polka dotted camper. Isn't that darling? This collection is called Christmas Adventure from Riley Blake. Go ahead and get a stack of fat quarters and sew along with me. I like starting with a stocking because I can get a feel for the collection and use a lot of pieces, and also stockings use a lot of fabrics because you've got 2 linings inside and the back, and of course all the pieces on the front. And so since they require so much fabric, I don't want to leave it till the end. So today we're going to make this stocking ornament with the Christmas Adventure collection from Riley Blake. Let's get started. Here's my stack of fat quarters from the Christmas Adventure collection by Beverly McCullough, Flamingo Toes, and produced by Riley Blake Designs. On the top of this stack was this darling camper print. And I knew that I wanted to feature this in the stocking ornament. Of course, my favorite camper is the polka dots. I measured out the size of the camper, and I determined that a rectangle that's about 3 1/4 wide by 2 1/4 tall is just the right size to accommodate the campers, the smaller campers. So I created a window template out of an index card with those dimensions. So I'm going to cut out 8 of these campers to get started on my 8 stocking ornaments. You can see there is a seam allowance in this size. I've provided a little bit of extra for the seam allowance. So I'm going to, and I pressed this and I starched it a little bit to get the creases out. So I'm just going to trace around the edges of my window template and cut out 8 of these campers. In the meantime, since I knew that my stocking was going to be 3 1/4 inches wide, I went ahead and drafted my stocking pattern to those dimensions. I'm probably going to use something red for the cuff and then fit the camper right here, and then do some foundation piecing. So I went ahead and drew this out. I will describe this pattern for you at the end. And I cut out 8 foundations from Pellon number 50 non-fusible interfacing. And this is what I will use for my foundation piecing. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and cut out 8 campers from the camper fabric. And this also comes in, I think, navy and pink, which are equally as cute. But I just like the sort of mid-century look of this green color. So I'm going to go ahead, trace, and cut out 8 little campers, and I'll be right back. Well, here's my fussy cut fabric. But since I'm only going to use 10 of my fat quarters, before I put this away, I wanted to show you that I think what I'm going to do is cut as many backings as I can from this fabric. So this will be, I don't think I can get all 8 from this fabric, but I'll try to get as many as I can. I would like, for the front of the stocking, I would like the toe to face right. So for the front of the stocking, the toe faces to the right. So that means that for the back, the toe will face left. And I will try to cut as many as I can from this. And then from the scraps that are left over after that, I'm going to use in the piecework for the front of the stocking. Also, I wanted to say that whenever I was tracing that little rectangle, I used a disappearing marker. So that's not like a felt tip pen. That was actually the disappearing marker like this. It's called air and water soluble ink. So now I'm going to take each one of these foundations and I'm just going to pin the camper onto the front. I am not too concerned about how high or how low. I'm going to use one of the red fabrics for the cuff, and then after that I'm not really sure. But I do want to leave room for the cuff, and I do want to put the camper somewhere along the straight edge. I made this long enough right here so that the lines are parallel, and I can you know, slide it up and down however much I want to. They don't all have to be identical. I have my 8 foundation pieces with the camper pinned, and I managed to get 5 backings, and then I have some scraps which hopefully I can incorporate into the foundation piecing down in the toe. I know that I want the cuff to be red, so I have some options. This one, which I like better. This one I really like because it's just so mid-century. The font style and everything just brings me back to my childhood. And I love the Argyle, and the Argyle comes in a couple of different colorways. There's this. So I think this will work for linings. I'm going to set that aside. And I'm going to use this for the cuffs. So I have white thread in my machine, and I'm just going to perhaps cut a strip of this fabric, just, you know, wide enough like this, and I'm going to foundation piece the cuff with this red fabric. Here we go. To get started with the cuffs, I've cut a strip that's 3 3/4 inches wide, and I made sure I cut right on the stars so it's lined up pretty well. And then I'm going to pin this to the top edge of the camper, and then sew along here with 1/4 inch, and then fold this back, press it, and then I'm just going to go ahead and add a decorative stitching line along that seam. Here's the cuff, stitch, flip, press, and then I did the triple zigzag. And you can see there's a little bit of extra, but not a lot, because I'm being very, very stingy with the fabric. So I will go ahead and repeat that for the other 7 stockings. Here's my last stocking, and this is all of the strip that I had left. So that could not have worked out any better. So I cut this strip along the 18-inch length along the selvage of the fat quarter, and it made exactly 8 cuffs. Now I've decided that I want to use the Argyle for the linings. So I'm going to go ahead and see how many I can get out of, I think I'll start with this one. And then, since I only got 5 backs out of this fabric, I'll see if I can use one of the Argyles for the remaining 3 backs. I'm going to press this first and then use my pattern and cut out 8 pairs of linings. I've determined that I can get the best use of my fabric by, well, I removed the selvage, but this is the selvage edge. And I'm going to do 1 pair and then flip 1 pair here, and this is the fold, and I might have enough on the fold to cut 1 more. So that's my plan of attack. I think I can only get 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 and 6. We'll see how it goes. I was able to get 4 sets of linings from this fat quarter, and then when I unfold the center, I'm hoping that I'll have enough for 2 more. But I'm going to use these for backing, so I want the toe to face to the left. I've cut 4 sets of linings from this greenish argyle. I can definitely fit this one. I think I can fit one here, and then I'll cut one from the white argyle. And I'll be right back. I don't know if you're keeping track, but we've used 4 fabrics. The camper, the green argyle, the white argyle, and the red, I'm going to call this the snowflake fabric. So underneath the camper, I'd like to have something sort of grounding. So I chose this green with the Christmas lights, and I'm going to cut a strip from this, and we're going to foundation piece below each camper. I cut a 2.5 inch by 22 inch strip from this green fabric, and now I will set it down, stitch, flip, press, and embroider. And then I think I'm going to come back and cut it like this so that we'll have an angle right here. So when I line this up, I'm going to let the one end extend out a little bit beyond the foundation. If I make it too short, then when I fold it over, it doesn't always come far enough to cover the foundation. So I'm going to put it a little bit over, and I'm going to set my seam allowance for a scant 1/4 inch. There's not a lot of room there. I was really tight when I cut these because I didn't want to waste any fabric. So I'm going to set that down, extend this over about a 1/4 inch, and then seam this with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go, it's sewn. I'm going to fold it back. That's good. Then I'm going to press it, and then I'm going to cut it like this, so that it looks something like this or like this. It doesn't have to be the same. They don't all have to be exactly the same, but just the idea is to cut it at an angle. From my first green strip, I got 5 patches, and I had these scraps left over, but I think they're too small to use. What do you think? See, they're just too tight. So since I had so much of a scrap, I think I'm going to cut the next strip only 2 inches wide, and we'll see if that works just as well. There we go. The 2 inch strip is actually better. So I'm going to cut 2 inch strips from now on. And then I'm cutting this off at an angle, but I want to leave that 1/4 inch seam allowance on the narrow end. The 2 inch wide strip is definitely better. Now I'm going to add maybe like a little feather stitch right here along the top of the green. There's my little feather stitch, and now I'm going to use this white argyle. I might cut that to a 2 inch strip. Trim it and flip it and embroider it, and I'll be right back. There's the white argyle, and I added a little baby blanket stitch. Now, in my imagination, I could use this fabric next. I thought I could feature this part of it where there would be just the like snowflakes and the flamingos and not so much of the campers, but I realized that I just really don't have enough of that. So I'll give it a try. Here, I think here this will be enough. And then eventually I'll have to switch to something else. Now I want the toe to be red, so I'm going to introduce this last fabric. I think I'm going to try to get this Happy Holidays right here centered on the toe. I'm not going to fussy cut, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's okay. Before I go any further, I'm just going to trim away from the back just so I can see exactly how much room I have for this Happy Holidays. I'm going to sort of roughly draw like that and cut it out. I always like the cuff and the toe to be red. All right, we're just going to go for it. There we go. And now I'm going to add a strong decorative stitch along here. There we go. There's a nice sort of a cross stitch. And now I'm going to baste around the entire outside. Now I'm going to finish a few more. Finish the top. As much as I would like this to work, to add this fabric, is just, I don't have enough. So I'm going to give up, give in, and add another fabric. This one's going to be really cute. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a 2-inch strip across the grain, and I'll use that for the next piece. And then I'm still going to use this one for the toe. Here we go. I've got my 8 completed fronts. I've got 8 backs, and I have 8 pairs of linings all cut out. And there are a few things that I learned along the way. One thing is that the white decorative stitching didn't show up very well here, so I switched to a red thread for that particular seam. And also, it was pretty hard to get these sentiments to line up exactly the way that I had in my head. And so next time I think I would just use this fabric more randomly, even if it cut off part of the saying. So the polka dot camper is my favorite. So I'm going to finish this one right now. I'll do this for the lining and this for the back. And just get started. So I need to match up one lining, and these face in opposite directions, of course. So this goes here. And this goes here. And I'm going to sew across the top of this one and the top of this one. And now I'll line these up, matching up the linings. And I like to fold the center seam down toward the lining. So these seam allowances right here, I'm folding down toward the lining. And also on this side. So I'm matching up the seams and folding the allowance toward the lining. And then I will just continue to pin around the outside, leaving an opening in the bottom of the lining. And then I'm going to stitch all the way around with a full 1/4 inch seam. Here's how it looks. And I have an opening here in the bottom of the lining. But before I turn it, I'm going to clip the seam allowances and even trim the seam allowances. So in like this and over here. Sort of like that. And then I'm going to trim the seam allowance about halfway off. Now I'm turning it right side out just to check and to be sure all the edges are caught. That looks good. Good. Okay, that's going to work. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my machine and stitch up this opening. I'll tuck the seam allowance inside like this, and then just top stitch it. No one's ever going to see this because it's going to be tucked way inside the bottom of the stocking. That looks good. And now to finish it, also a hanging loop from Red and White Baker's Twine. And I'll add a little bow. I'm going to add a little smudge of glue right here to the center of the bow. Okay, so here's the hanging loop, here's the bow, and I'm going to tie the ends of the streamers into each one into an overhand knot. And there's my first stocking from the new collection. I have 7 more to finish. And then our next project, I'm so inspired by these reds, and then there's a third red here. I think I'm going to make a Santa next. I have an idea in my head for a new Santa design. Okay, before we go on, I promised to describe this pattern. So the cuff is 3 1/4, and I just kept it straight, absolutely straight, 3 1/4 for 4 inches. So this is 4 inches down, just a rectangle. And that way I was pretty confident that I could fit a cuff and the little camper motif right here. Then the total length, let's just say from the top to here, is about 7 inches. So after 4 inches, just curve it out. And this is 4 3/4 out to the very edge of that square is 4 3/4. So this is 4 3/4. This is 7. Come down for 4, and then just a gentle curve back and around. Nothing to it. You can totally make this. Here's the finished stocking. I have 7 more to go. Okay. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.